Have you ever felt like the media just isn't telling you the full story? From shifting news networks to rising influencers spreading misinformation, things are getting complicated. Today, we're diving into the real reasons why media is changing, and why it's more important than ever to stay informed. Stay tuned, you won't want to miss this.
The media landscape is currently undergoing a profound transformation that has left many people feeling confused and even disillusioned. These changes are particularly significant because the way news is delivered and consumed plays a crucial role in shaping public opinion and influencing political discourse. It's no longer just about reading the newspaper in the morning or watching the evening news broadcast on TV. Today, the boundaries between traditional media outlets, social media platforms, and new forms of content are increasingly blurred, creating a complex and sometimes overwhelming media environment. And it's not just the technology that's changed, it's the narratives themselves. What we're seeing now is that both old and new media are shifting in ways that are difficult to keep up with, and it's raising important questions about how we engage with information and whether we can trust what we're hearing. For example, take MSNBC, a network that was once considered a stronghold of progressive views. It's a network that traditionally stood firm in its criticism of right-wing politics, particularly during the Trump years. But recently, something strange has been happening. MSNBC, once seen as a bastion of anti-Republican sentiment, is now shifting its tone in a way that feels like an attempt to present a more neutral stance. This pivot to false equivalency between Democrats and Republicans has been a topic of increasing concern. It's almost as though the network is trying to avoid choosing a side altogether, perhaps out of fear that doing so could alienate a broader audience. It's a troubling trend because MSNBC, like many traditional news outlets, was once seen as a counterbalance to the conservative bias that dominated other media channels. But today, it seems like even MSNBC is bowing to the pressures of corporate interests and political considerations, rather than maintaining its commitment to progressive values. What's perhaps even more concerning is how other major networks, such as CNN, are also moving toward a similar approach. CNN, long regarded as a reliable source of news for many viewers, is now giving more room to voices that are far from impartial. It's clear that CNN is taking a more centrist approach, perhaps hoping to appeal to a broader audience in a time of deep political division. But in doing so, they've been accused of giving disproportionate airtime to figures who are not necessarily aligned with the values of mainstream, progressive thought. In many cases, it feels like they are more focused on ratings and access to key political figures than on providing the public with the truth. This shift in coverage has left many viewers questioning the integrity of the network and whether it's still committed to the principles of journalism that once made it stand out. CNN and other traditional media outlets are increasingly becoming a part of the establishment machinery rather than acting as an independent check on power. The rise of new media has only made things more complicated. In many ways, social media platforms and online content creators have taken over the role that traditional news outlets used to play in shaping public opinion. Figures like Jimmy Dore, who have gained a significant following, are now a major force in the conversation about politics and media. While Dore has built a reputation for challenging the establishment and speaking out against corporate power, his rise has also highlighted some of the dangers of the new media landscape. There's no doubt that some of the issues he talks about, such as the corruption within the political system, resonate with many people. But at the same time, there's a risk that by giving these voices too much of a platform, we're endorsing ideas that don't necessarily align with progressive values. For instance, while Dore has spoken out against issues like corporate greed and war, his embrace of certain right-wing populist figures has raised eyebrows. This shift in his rhetoric has left some wondering whether his critiques of the political system are being overshadowed by his increasingly sympathetic views toward far-right ideologies. This is where things get tricky. The idea of anti-establishment sentiment can sometimes blur the lines between legitimate criticism and outright conspiracy theories. And that's where the real danger lies. The new media, which operates outside the traditional boundaries of mainstream journalism, has the potential to amplify voices that may not always have the public's best interests at heart. People who were once seen as intellectuals or rational voices, such as Richard Dawkins, have shifted focus in recent years. Dawkins, known for his sharp critique of religion and his advocacy for secularism, has increasingly ventured into cultural controversies that seem disconnected from his previous intellectual pursuits. For instance, his commentary on transgender issues has garnered significant attention, but it's also alienated a portion of his fan base. These are the same people who once looked to him for clear, logical arguments, but now, it feels like he's contributing to the very divisions he once sought to dismantle. And it's not just Dawkins. Figures like Sam Harris, once respected for his intellectual contributions, have also moved away from their core focus of rational inquiry. Harris, who became famous for his critiques of religion, now finds himself caught up in debates over topics like free speech and identity politics, leaving many of his supporters disillusioned. It's not that these are unimportant issues, but they seem to have distracted from the core issues that Harris used to address so effectively. When someone like Harris, who once engaged with complex moral and philosophical questions, turns their attention to less substantive debates, it undermines the very principles that made them influential in the first place. It's a shift that's reflected in many parts of the media today, where the focus is shifted from rational discourse to cultural flashpoints that, while relevant, don't necessarily contribute to the bigger picture. This kind of shift is part of a broader trend where the lines between left and right, conservative and progressive, are becoming increasingly blurred. The rise of right-wing populism has thrown a wrench into the works, and it's challenging traditional notions of political ideology. Right-wing populists have managed to capture the attention of millions by positioning themselves as anti-establishment, even though their policies often serve the interests of the elite. Figures like Donald Trump have capitalized on this narrative, tapping into the frustration that many people feel with the political system. But the problem is that these movements are not necessarily driven by a desire for positive change. Instead, they often rely on divisive rhetoric and fear-mongering, pitting people against each other to maintain power. This is not the kind of political movement that aligns with the values of equality, justice, and fairness that many of us hold dear. It's essential to understand the dangers of right-wing populism. While it may appear to be a movement that challenges the political status quo, it's actually a force that undermines democracy and social cohesion. Right-wing populists often appeal to people's fears and insecurities, promising to restore order and bring about change, but their solutions are rarely grounded in reality. Instead of tackling the root causes of inequality and injustice, they focus on scapegoating marginalized groups and promoting policies that benefit the rich and powerful. This kind of politics is not the answer to the problems we face, but unfortunately, it's gaining traction in many parts of the world. The rise of right-wing populism is closely tied to the spread of misinformation. In the digital age, false narratives can spread like wildfire, and once they've taken root, it's incredibly difficult to dislodge them. Misinformation has become a major force in shaping public opinion, and it's a problem that's only getting worse. In many cases, people are more likely to trust what they see online than what they hear from traditional news outlets, even if that information is false. This creates a situation where people are consuming a constant stream of misleading or inaccurate content, which reinforces their existing beliefs and biases. It's no surprise that people are increasingly drawn to voices that reinforce their worldview, even if those voices are peddling dangerous ideas. One of the main reasons misinformation spreads so easily is because of social media. Platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube have become the primary sources of information for millions of people, but they are also breeding grounds for false narratives. These platforms are designed to amplify content that gets the most engagement, which often means that sensational, polarizing content rises to the top. This creates an environment where misinformation is not just tolerated, but rewarded. The more outrageous and divisive the content, the more likely it is to go viral. This is why it's so important to be discerning about the information we consume and to be vigilant about the sources we trust. It's also important to recognize the role that media outlets play in shaping the narrative. Whether it's a traditional news network or a social media influencer, the people who control the flow of information have an incredible amount of power. The media has the ability to shape how we perceive the world around us, and if those in charge of the media are more interested in generating clicks and views than in telling the truth, then we're all at risk. This is why we need to be critical of the information we receive and hold the media accountable for the stories they tell. Ultimately, the way forward is clear. We need to demand better from our media. Whether it's traditional outlets or new media, we need journalists, influencers, and content creators who are willing to speak truth to power, who are committed to accuracy, and who will not be swayed by the pressures of fame, fortune, or access to power. We need people who are willing to dig into the hard issues, to challenge the status quo, and to provide us with the information we need to make informed decisions. So, what can we do as consumers of media? First and foremost, we need to be diligent in seeking out credible sources of information. We need to make sure that we're getting our news from outlets that have a proven track record of accuracy and integrity. Second, we need to be critical of the information we consume. Just because something is shared widely on social media doesn't mean it's true. And finally, we need to engage with others in a way that encourages thoughtful, respectful debate. The media may be fractured, but that doesn't mean we can't come together to demand better. If you found this video helpful, Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay informed, stay critical, and let's continue the conversation in the comments below. Let's make sure that the media we consume is shaping a better world, not just creating division.